Hello everyone. I'm happy that you're here and you are joining me for today's video. Today is going to look a little bit different. At the time I was filming this, I was feeling the fall. It was nice and crisp, and that made me want to Google some fall colors. Now, as I was Googling this image, it reminded me very much of the Kuretake watercolors, and so I went and checked, and I could actually find the exact colors. A couple of them were from the Kuretake Art Nouveau set, and the other three I was able to get from my 48 set that I have. And it was an exact match, so I was pretty stoked about that. But as I was starting to work with them, I realized that the blue and the yellow quickly turned into a green, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted those colors to stay separate but together, if that makes sense. So I realized I had too much water on the paper, and I ended up having to mop up some of that water again. It was fairly challenging in the beginning, and as I was moving the colors around, it just wasn't working the way I usually approach these backgrounds. So then I tried again, and this time I rolled my brush over the paper, trying to not disturb the other color that is adjacent, so that I could get some pretty distinct colors, because I had picked those colors for a reason. So that in itself was pretty difficult for me to do, because my instinct is to move the colors around and let them mingle on the paper organically, and I couldn't do that today. So I was ready for the challenge, and I just worked with it the best that I could. And I ended up with something that was unfamiliar to me. I just looked at it and I couldn't really figure out what I was going to do with it. So I just kept working with it a little bit more. I knew I wanted those 5 colors, and because the blue was throwing me off a little bit, I had to keep adding a little bit more blue, because I felt like the yellows and the oranges were taking over. That turned out to be very difficult, because like I said, I didn't want part of the background to turn green, because that wasn't the goal of this exercise today. I was getting a little frustrated with it, because it was something new, and I felt like a fish out of water. But I realized that it was a really great exercise for me, because so often I reach for familiar things and I do familiar things, and I feel like I'm not challenging myself. And every now and then I like to challenge myself, and this definitely was the case in this painting today. Before I did this one, I used these colors in another background, and it failed miserably, because I had approached it the way I usually do, which is have a lot of water on the paper and then start moving the colors around. and it just wouldn't work, and it ended up in a big mess. So I put that one to the side and I started this one, and immediately I could tell that this one would work so much better. And that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes when I'm unfamiliar with a technique and I don't like it at all, and then I just start over. And then usually the second time it works so much better because I will have learned my lesson. So now I'm just intensifying the colors a little bit more. I deliberately started out very, very soft because of the issues I had with the background before this one. So I just wanted to build up the colors instead of going in like full force. It turns out that this rolling technique worked really, really well, and also obviously not having so much water on the paper. I wasn't sure about the movement of the color. Again, it's something that was unfamiliar to me, and so I was not sure that it was something I could work with. But nevertheless, I continued on because I really truly wanted to see where this was going. And also, I was a little pressed on time and I didn't have time to start over again. In the end, I felt that I could work with what I had, and that was much better than how I felt with my other one. So I left it to dry, and this is how it dried, and I was really happy with how it turned out. So then I added some more splatters. I chose the lighter of the two oranges, and I also used some of the gold. I am not being strategic as to where I'm putting those droplets. I just want to put something extra on the paper that will allow me to use these elements to doodle with. At this point, I think I was still thinking it was going to be a horizontal piece. But after it had dried, I realized I wanted to do it vertically. It still took me quite a while to continue and get ready to put my first few lines down. So usually what I do is I try to divide the page a little bit. And then I wanted to connect the orange dots a little bit. And at first I was going to outline them in just sort of square shapes, but then I decided to turn them into flowers. And that usually happens totally on the fly. I knew I wanted to put lines in those flowers, but as I was putting down my first line, my pen kind of got stuck, and then I was like, wait a minute, maybe instead of extending the lines all the way to the end, maybe I'll just make them different heights. And so that's what I did, and I ended up loving it. I really like when that happens because it's these moments that take you out of your comfort zone and make you try new things. And so I was really, really happy with how that turned out. So I continued doing that to the rest of the flowers, and then I thickened up some of those lines a little bit more, and that really made those flower buds pop. I really love how these came out, and they feel very retro to me, and I think they match the background colors really well. So now I have flowers and very faint stems, and now I'm trying to figure out what my next step is. Should they be growing from the ground up, or should they be in some sort of a vase? I was unsure for a long time, and then I decided to just connect them to some kind of ground. I wasn't sure yet was what I was going to do with the gold splatters that were in between, so I decided to not extend that line through the gold splatter, but just leave it so that I could leave my options open. And naturally, we need some cobblestones to divide the page a little bit. In between these elements, I sit and I ponder and I try to figure out what to do next. So I wasn't sure what to do with those orange dots that were below the surface because I couldn't really turn them into flowers as well. So I created some hanging pods or maybe some lantern type things that were hanging down. I still wasn't quite sure if that was going to work, but I had already put it there, so I had to make it work. And then I extended the cobblestones a little bit more. Sometimes that happens, and I feel like it needs to be extended, and that was the case here as well. So next we are working on the gold splatters, and I decided to also kind of turn them into flowers, although I didn't want to do the same, so I ended up doing these. I am regretting making those tendrils that long. I kind of wished I had made them a little bit shorter, but because I felt like it was almost overtaking the flowers, which I didn't want to do. But because there were only two, I figured it would be okay. But I had not connected them yet, so they were still kind of floating in the air until I knew what else to do with them. So I just moved on to the bottom again and kind of filled that empty space with some more lines. What I was going to do with them, I didn't know yet, but I just had to fill that space with something, and lines are always a good idea. It took me a long time to decide whether I should include them in my bouquet of flowers, and ultimately then I decided it was a good idea, because what else are they going to be if not more flowers in that bouquet? Then it was time to fill that other space here a little bit more. I didn't want to take away from the flowers. I needed something that was a little bit more dainty. And I was contemplating whether I should put some bubbles on this side, but then I decided for these, I don't know, stars, you could call them, some little flashy things. So I felt that was a good addition because they were fine and small enough not to take away from the flowers. And then I sat a long time again because I didn't know how to fill my lines. There was a dot there, and so I decided to circle that and add some lines around it. And I really like how that turned out. And then the same with this guy, I just wanted to incorporate it a little bit more, because if you see up top there where I drew those first lines, I had also outlined the dot, the gold dot that was in there, and so I felt like that tied everything back together. And now we're back to shading, and y'all know I love this part. It just makes the whole piece pop even more when I add some colored pencils to the piece. This is the usual size paper that I always use, a 6x9, but somehow this space needed so much more stuff. I ran out of things to doodle, and so I decided to add just some scribbles to the background, and I kind of like how that turned out. It gives it something to look at without anything really being there, and it adds more texture to it, and I think I want to do that again. That was fun to do. If I decide to shade in with my pencils, I always try to do it before I add any final touches, because if I put my dots on the paper first, it's really hard to get around those. So I always make sure that if I decide to shade, I do that before I do anything else. And then this is my favorite new dotting tool. It's old, it's from my cookie business days, and that's why it says Borderlands Bakery on it. That was the company that I bought it from. But it's a cute little dauber tool, and I love using it for the bubbles. What I noticed though, last couple of times when I used it, I had put it over the colored pencils and it was a little harder to apply because of the oils, I guess, that are in the pencils. I don't really know, but it didn't take the acrylic paint as well. And so I decided not to put shading behind those bubbles for that reason. And now we're just adding finishing touches with my dotting tool, and I just use the acrylic paint for the gold, the white and the black that I use. It's what I have been using and what's been working really well. I think you could also use gouache if you don't have it, or you can just use your pens. You can use a white pen, you can use a gold pen, black pen obviously. I like to use the dotting tools because they allow me to get different sizes of dots when I keep going. And I feel like with the pens I tend to only get one specific size unless I work a little bit more on it. It's hard to explain. I just got used to using the dotting tool and I really like the texture that it gives in the end. Oh, and we're already done. That was really fast. So here's the final product. I really like how it turned out. I had no idea how it was going to end up, and I just love when that happens. And I love that retro feel that those flowers give it, and I like the color combo. Not something that I would have picked from my brain. So I'm really glad that I did that. I hope you enjoyed it too. I hope you like this color combo. I hope you like how it turned out. Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next week.